Hello everybody, what is going on? Needs More Drums with a little bit of a different video here. Typically you see me post a lot of City Skylines content, but occasionally you'll see me throw in a couple of different videos from some different games. And this is one of those games that I really enjoy playing in my free time. It's a nice break from City Skylines, something to just, put on some music, relax, and do some work. And that is Farming Simulator 22. Now, I decided to release a couple of videos, just each one explaining some different ways to play the game, some different ways to get, how to kind of get started. I know this game can be a little bit daunting at first because, well, there are tutorials put out by the developers and, there's plenty of YouTube videos on also how to do this. I thought, I would take a crack at making a nice, easy guide to getting started with the game. So let's just go ahead, jump right into it. There's plenty to cover, so let's get started with the first episode, which is just how do you get started? Let's go. All right, so Farming Simulator 22, there's a lot to offer in this game. You could, just be a regular farmer, grow some crops. You could also take care of animals, do forestry. Even they added in this game production chains, so running different kinds of factories with raw materials and having like a distribution network and selling your finished products. The possibilities are endless. And not to mention that this game also offers the ability to download mods created by, other people. It's free to download, and you can even get them on a certain amount of them you can even get on console as well. So just real quick before we actually jump in, here's the menu. Pretty straightforward, right? The only thing that I do want to take your attention to real quick is downloadable content. So I do want to put up another video about how to actually navigate this. This is called the Mod Hub. This is the Farming Simulator Mod Hub. But just so you know that this exists, I'm going to reference it a little bit throughout the video. So this is where you download all of your mods, and this whole screen will become very, very familiar in just a minute once we get started, with the farm and purchasing equipment. But just so you know that this is here. This is the place to get all of the mods that you can imagine. And I mean, you can also download some offline too, but I think I'll probably do a little video on how to install mods both on the Mod Hub and off of the Mod Hub, since might not be it's pretty straightforward, but just to cross all the bridges. We're going to talk about that too later, so stay tuned. But for now, let's go ahead and just jump into a game and get started. So what we want to do is, the first thing when you open up Farming Simulator is head over to the career mode, and then you'll have a few different game save slots. There's plenty of empty slots, so you can literally make not as many games as you want, but plenty to keep you busy. So we'll just go ahead and choose one of these. And so now when you click on an empty game slot, you have three options. So you can either start as a new farmer, you can be a farm manager, or you can start from scratch. So these are there's a lot of settings in the game that are pretty customizable, but in terms of each of these, there are some very important differences, and that is just the capital and equipment that you start with. So in new farmer mode, you already own some land and equipment. It generally starts you on a pretty good sized farm. You own some fields, you own some tractors and a bunch of equipment that you'll need to get started. Typically, you won't own any animals, but you might have, depending on the map, you might have some animal pens, like a cow barn or a chicken coop that's empty, and you'll need to buy animals to fill it. But you won't have as much money in the bank because you already have so many assets, so to speak. So you don't need to go out and buy a bunch of new equipment. You can pretty much just get started with what you have. Farm Manager is a little bit different. You don't own any land or buildings or equipment, but I think you start, depending on the map, usually I've seen about $1.5 million, so about $1.5 million. Plenty of capital to get you started. You could buy tons of equipment, tons of land for that money, and it's a pretty good way if you want to be a little more creative and have the means to do so. That's probably a pretty safe game mode for you. And finally, the start from scratch is you'll have a very, very limited amount of capital, typically about 500,000, and I think if I remember correctly, about 200,000 of that will be on a loan, or about 200,000 of that will be on a loan. So then you also have to remember that you have to pay that back. That will incur interest. So it's definitely you got to be a little bit more resourceful about what you purchase first. You can't just go crazy and buy tons and tons of land and tons of really expensive tractors. Typically, it's better for this game mode if you really want to start to really be clear, start from scratch and just have a small tractor, have a small farm, and kind of work your way up and get some satisfaction from building and growing your business. So those are the three modes. I think for this one we're gonna just jump into to new farmer mode, and just to kind of see what you get. I'm also going to use a actually I'll get to that in a second. So let's just go ahead and go into new farmer mode. So the next screen that'll come up is actually the map screen. So when you get to this screen, there's tons of maps to choose from. It just in the base game there are 3 maps. There's Elm Creek, Hute Baileron, which is more of a European style map. Elm Creek is an American style map. And then this one was part of the, I believe, part of the pre-order, but a lot of you might have this, Erlingrot. It's another European themed map. But then also, if you download maps, you can download tons of maps from the mod hub as well. And so there's just a plethora. Oh, and especially this is the forestry map that came with the Platinum DLC, the huge logging expansion and such. But what I want to do for this game is I've played these maps. I want to do something a little bit different. I downloaded some modded maps, and so I'm going to choose a modded map that I like, and that is going to be the White Farm. So this looks like a pretty good, nice little map. Got a fair amount of fields, not super huge. It's kind of meant to be just your farm, so to speak. Usually the maps are a little bit bigger, and there are tons of farms on one map, and tons of fields. But this one's a little more simple. I think this will be a great one to get started on and kind of show you guys the ropes of the different types of equipment that you'll need and such. So let's go ahead and just check this out. I've never played this before. I'm excited to give it a shot. So let's go ahead and jump right in. All right, now the next page that is going to come up is your installed mods that you want to bring into the game. Now, I have a ton. Obviously, I'm not going to use all these. You will have none of these if you're just starting off. But again, once we get into the game, I'll kind of explain how certain mods can be useful. So I'm just going to go through this list. And anyone, with a checkbox is obviously one that's going to go into the game with us. But I'm just going to go through this list and kind of take out some of the ones that I don't want. And then when we're ready to go with the mods that we want to bring into this game, I'll go ahead and click start, and we'll go ahead and jump right in. All right, and so once the game loads in, for the first time, you're actually going to be able to create your character. And so there's plenty of options to choose from, plenty of different facial structures. We have our hairstyles, facial hair, other facial hair, pre-made outfits that we can choose from. These are, very already put together, so don't have to really edit these too much. Or you can kind of make your own. They got some different shirts, some different pants and such, and boots and hats, gloves, even some sunglasses. But yeah, so I think we're gonna stick with this for now. And let's go ahead, and once we're ready, we just press the escape button, or you can click on all these. These are all clickable as well. So we're just go ahead and confirm this. And now we are in the game. So, a couple of things. I do have some mods installed. And, not that you have to install any of these. This is completely personal preference, but I just want to tell you that, I do have some mods installed. So the game might not look exactly what yours will look like upon starting, but I'm going to really only explain things that are relevant to the vanilla player for the first time opening up the game. So one thing that the reason that I wanted to point that out is because as of right now, it is currently March. As you can see up on the top right, that is our UI. We have our weather, our season, and the time of day, and then how much money is in the bank. And so typically when you open up a game, you're going to start in the fall, and your crops will be pretty much ready for harvest. And then so the first thing you do is, jump in, do a harvest, sell some crops in the winter, and then you got your first profit for the year. Whereas this one's a little bit different. You can kind of, you get to choose what crops you want to plant, because a lot of crops have growing seasons in the spring. And so starting in the spring is it's a good mod, and it's one that I really enjoy using, especially in a new game, because you can kind of set up your game better to cater to what you want. But before we even get into any equipment, I just want to go over some game settings, how to navigate some of the different in-game menus, and just kind of getting a general feel for what's available to you in terms of things like that, rather than just jumping right in and doing some work, because it is important to understand how the game works and to customize the game to suit your personal taste. So the first thing that you want to be conscious of is that there's a difference between a pause menu and actually pausing the game. So depending on how you have your controls mapped, there's actually an ability to do this, which actually stops time and allows you to pause the game. But while your game is paused, you can't do a lot of the things that you could do while the game is running. And in particular, there are some menus that you won't be able to access and you won't be able to work with while the game is on pause. So just keep that in mind. It's best to not really pause the game unless you are going to be stepping away from a computer or anything. It's always, better to keep the game running at, whatever speed you like. And you can also change the time scale, which we'll get to in a second. So anyway, let's let the game run. And now let's actually go open the game menu where we'll be able to edit a few of our settings. So one of the things, again, on the left, you might see some icons that you don't have, and these are because of mods that I've installed. So don't worry, you don't need any of these to still have a great game experience. I just like to have some for a little more realism purposes, and I can get into those in another video, but for now we're just going to talk about, again, just some things that are relevant to new players. So the first thing that I want to bring your attention to is this menu right here. So this is the map menu. This is the map overview, and there you can learn a lot of different things from this menu. The first thing that I want to bring your attention to is all of these are all of the fields. They're all numbered, and it's very easy to figure out which one is which. And then you can also see what types of crops are growing on these fields, indicated by these colors. And you can actually click these, to show which ones have which crops, and so on and so forth. So the next thing is the farmland option. So if you want to buy land or sell land, press this overlay comes up, and you can actually click on different areas of farmland and see how much they're worth, how big they are, and just kind of the designation of the land. So the number, the land number is not always the same as a field number. So just keep that in mind, that you will be able to buy land. Essentially, not every land is a field, right? So there are some different options to purchase different plots of land. Something might be like another farm. Something might be a factory or some sort. So yeah, not all land is going to be just a field. So you can buy different parts of the map like this. And if we go back, click X again to go to map overview, we can also see some different things about our fields as well. So we have additional crop types here, grass and oilseed, radish. And then we can also look at our growth stages of our crops, which I'll explain a lot of these things in due time. But just know that this is where you could see which growth stage your fields are in. And so right now we have a lot of seeds that are planted apparently. And so we have a lot of things growing in all of our crops, or in all of our fields. And then, we'll also be able to see different types of field states as we go through the game. And then this is an important menu as well. Soil composition. We could see which of our fields have weeds, if they need fertilizer, lime, rolling, if they're mulched, or if there are field stones. And we'll get into, again, what each one of these mean in a minute. And then finally, this is just a list of important things around the map. So you could see any vehicle that we own or any piece of equipment that we own will be signified by one of these white icons. And you can click, on each one and kind of see what they are. And we'll have another way to to identify these in a minute, but that's one way to do it. And then we can also identify various important points on the map. So anything with one of these animal icons, it's obviously going to be an animal pen, and it'll show the different type of animal that it corresponds to. And then there will also be a home icon, which is your house where you could sleep and sometimes change your clothes if the map supports it. And then there are also going to be important other areas on the map. So for example, these are sell points, these arrows with this, platform here. So this is where you could sell various crop types. And I'll show you later about how to know where to sell certain crops and how you identify which sell points accept certain crops. So that's one way to sell your crops. And then there's also these are the production chains that I was talking about, these little conveyor belts with the boxes here. So these production chains, you could, I'll get a little more into these later, but to put it simply, you don't own them from the start. So you need to go and buy them, and then you can actually use the finished goods. But even if you don't own them, you can still sell your raw materials to them. So for example, the bakery, I believe, accepts crops such as wheat or maybe barley, or maybe oats. I don't really exactly remember, but you could sell your harvested crop, so your wheat or your barley, right? Right after you harvest it off your field, you could sell it to the bakery but the bakery will produce cakes or forget what else it produces, but cakes are one of them, for example. So if it produces cakes or bread, I think it does, then you won't be able to actually go back and get the bread and then sell the bread until you own the bakery. Then you could take advantage of what the production chain actually produces. So until you own it, you can only sell to it. You can't actually sell the products from it, if that makes sense. Anyway, okay, got that. So there's also a couple things here, such as loading stations, anything with this icon, which I'm not really, here's one. So loading stations are to buy materials in bulk. And typically they will be something like lime or fertilizer. And I'll explain what each one of these do in a minute. But just know that if you see something with that, that is something where you could fill some of your equipment with bulk products. And then finally, some other two important ones are going to be your gas station on your map and then your store, the dealer. These are always important. You're going to be dealing with this a lot. And then there's always, more often than not, there's an animal dealer on the map as well. So this is where you can go to buy any of your animals if you don't actually want to have them delivered. So I think that kind of covers all of these contracts. We'll talk about those in a minute. But this is the icon that will appear where you want to sell contracted goods, or, well, I guess contracted product. If you're doing a harvesting contract, you'll want to sell your grains at the place indicated by an exclamation point like that. So we'll talk about that in a second, but let's move on to some other important settings. So this icon with the steering wheel, mine's going to be a little bit different because I'm running a mod called Courseplay. But when you start off, you can assign the AI to do specific tasks on your farm. So how you do that is if you click on, say, a tractor, you could set it to a destination and then have it pick, a field. And so, for example, you could have it drive to this field. And obviously, this is, I don't know I haven't looked at this map yet, but essentially that's what you could do. You could have it drive to different fields. And then once you get there, you can actually have it do some work. And so, like I said, since I'm running Courseplay, it's a little bit different, but there will be an option here for you to select different jobs, such as, field work, or just drive to it, or you can, in the field work option, it will do whatever job is related to the equipment that it has. So if it has a cultivator, for example, it will cultivate the field. If it has a plow, it'll plow the field, and so on and so forth. So that's one way to use your AI workers, is to control them remotely from here. And there's another way that I'll talk about in a later video, but this is just one way to get an overview of where all of your equipment is and kind of what's going on your farm. So the next icon that I want to talk about is this crop calendar. And so this is new to this game. In past games, there was no seasonal aspect. You always had to use a mod to be able to access some sort of seasonal aspect to the game. This one has in-game seasons built in. So the crop calendar is your go-to source to see what crops you can plant in which month and when you can harvest them. So any crop with a green bar, that is the planting season, and then the orange season is when you can harvest. So for example, it looks like if we planted corn in April, we'd be able to harvest it around October. And some crops take a little bit longer. For example, canola has quite a long growth period. You plant it in August, and then you can't really harvest it until July of the next year. So it will take the full 11 or 12 months to be able to get to that harvest state. So that's the crop calendar. Pretty self-explanatory, pretty simple. Let's move on. Next menu is the weather. So the weather, you can actually see a few hours in advance, and there's actually some buildings that you can place down that can allow you to see weather farther in advance. But this is, this is generally pretty good, and you can see the day a little bit in advance, and then the upcoming days and months as well. So you can see the forecast and kind of plan your work accordingly. Next option, or next menu, I guess, is the sell menu. So this one is, again, pretty self-explanatory. Just you click on a product, and then you could see where you could sell it. So I know this could be a little deceiving, buying and selling. Buying is if you sell it to them, what are they going to pay for it? So this is them buying your product. There are cases where you may need a certain product, for example, to feed your animals, and you don't have any storage of the correct crop to feed your animals. you may need to purchase it from them. So then this would, if you could purchase it, this would be the column where you'd be able to see the price that you would pay for it. So this is going to be very important. As you harvest your crops, you want to sell at, obviously you don't want to take a loss, so you want to sell when this is the highest. And to do that, you could press this button here that says show price fluctuations. And then you can see how the prices have risen and fallen over the year. So typically you're going to sell cereal crops in the winter. That's typically when they fetch the highest price. Some crops, might be better to sell in June. I believe canola is more of a, actually in this case, no, I guess not. But sometimes, for example, soybeans are highest in July. So you want to sell those in July and not in the winter. That will be a very, very disappointing profit. But yeah, you can go through and see all of the different products that you could sell and purchase. And see, for example, if you were to buy gas, you can't actually sell gas, but you could buy it from the gas station for $1,250 per 1,000 liters. And so all these prices are in per 1,000 liters. That is important, as it says right here. So just for the record, that is reflective of the per 1,000 liter price. So this menu is also very important. All these menus are important, but this one especially. So this is your vehicle overview menu. This is where you can see all of the vehicles and equipment that you own, how long you've had it, the engine hours on that vehicle, the maintenance level or damage level, I guess. So it starts at 100% and then it'll fall, closer to 0, and you will need to repair it, or it might not work as effectively as it would had it otherwise been in good shape. And then I believe this is whether or not you're leasing it. So as you can see, I own all of these in new farmer mode. We own all of our vehicles, so that is irrelevant. And then this is the value of that vehicle. So if I were to sell it right now, this is the money that I would get for it. And then just a general finances menu. I don't spend too much time in this, but you could see basically anything that you do: buying vehicles, buying animals, buildings, land, etc., etc. There's plenty of things to keep track of here to make sure that you're making a good profit. And then so this is our animal menu. It looks like we actually do have some animals in this map, which is really, really cool. Usually we don't have animals in the map when we start off. So we do have some pigs, we have some chickens, and some cows as well. So this is where you see all the animals that you have, and you could see their health and food, how much food they have. And we'll get into another video about how to actually raise your animals. So we'll just skip over this for now. And now this is where I do have a mod with contracts, so it's not going to look exactly like this for you, but generally it's going to be the same. So this is where you can accept contracts from other farmers. So if you don't have, a lot of money and you want to kill some time and go and help out some other farmers for a profit, they will pay you to do different kinds of work. So there are different kinds of contracts. There are fertilizing contracts that we have available right now. And then there's also baling, cultivating, harvesting, etc., etc. So one thing about these, though, is that you don't have to use your own equipment if you don't have it. You could either accept the contract if you have your own equipment, but if you do not have your own equipment and you want to borrow items, if you click this button here, or backspace in this case as well, you will actually lease their equipment for a fee, but you'll lease it and then be able to use their equipment and return it after the contract is finished. Now, you cannot use their leased equipment on your fields. You have to use it only for the contract. So just, don't think that you can just take somebody's fertilizer spreader and just go fertilize all your fields. It doesn't work like that. But just so I know, you don't need to have all the equipment needed for the contract. You can actually lease theirs as well. It'll just, you won't make as much money. So just wanted to point that out. Next menu is your production chains. This is going to be anything that you own that is a production chain. As you can see in this map, we have some gardens, we have some fermenting silos and such, and then we also have a couple of farm productions as well that are unique to the map. But yeah, you might not have any of these from the start, depending on the map you're playing. But as you buy production chains, this is where you can see all of your vital information to this. How many materials you need, how many materials you're making, what the recipe is for the product that you want, and then how much it's going to cost you, how many cycles per month it's going to run. So this is the recipe for one cycle, right? So 10 tomatoes and 5 lettuce are going to give us 13 mixed salads. And then this is going to run 1,920 times in a month. Okay. So that's how that works. But you do have to make sure that you activate it if you want to run a production chain. You got to make sure that this is active, and you can do that by pressing this button here. So just a quick overview of production chains. We won't get too much into this right now, but just so you know that this is there, here it is. Next, your statistics. This is just any kind of useful information if you're curious about how much, how many acres you've plowed in today or over the course of this save. You can, check this out and just learn a couple things about your farm, about what you've been spending your time on. So now these menus are arguably the most important when you're getting started, because these are where you're going to set all of your game setting. So we're going to go through these one by one, and this is going to be the last thing that we're going to do for this episode. Is just go through these settings, and then the next episode we're going to get into some equipment and how to actually get started doing some field work. But these are very, very important, and it's important to understand what each of these does so that you can cater to the game experience to be what you want. So obviously we can play and pause the game from here. It's the same function as the first button that I showed you, where it just says that the game is paused. That is what this does. You can name your save game here. We can also set our autosave interval. I typically like to have mine off. I save, pretty frequently, and then sometimes when you're autosaving, it'll kind of pause the game real quick, and it's just kind of annoying, so I like to keep it off. Timescale is how fast your days are going to go by, your hours, and your time, obviously. But my preference is I like to have it set to 5 times and 5 times in 3-day seasons, and I'll explain that in a minute. But I think that is a good setting, if you want to kind of feel like things are kind of moving along, but you don't want to have too much downtime, but you don't feel rushed. I think this is a very, very good beginner time scale to have. 5 times 3-day seasons. And so next is economic difficulty. Typically I like to set this to normal. I feel like, it's just going to kind of drop the prices a little bit so that you have to, sell more crops to make a little bit more money. Nothing crazy. If you want it on easy, keep it on easy. I think it really just has to do prices and contracts. So no big deal there. Traffic, I like to keep traffic on. It's just AI vehicles on the map. Pretty self-explanatory. Seasonal growth. This is what I like about this game compared to older games. So in the older games, we didn't have seasons. This allows you to take advantage of that crop calendar that we were looking at. So typically, I would recommend to have this on. So in this, it actually reflects the crop calendar, and so instead of just harvesting every 3 months, you might harvest once a year, and reflective of more of a real life situation. So I like to keep that on. I would recommend that you do so as well. It's really fun and one of the cool features of the game. Next one is days per month. Right now, it always starts us at 1 day. So each game day is 1 month. And so you can move through the year pretty quickly. But I personally like to have 3-day seasons. I think it's a little bit, sometimes you don't have as much to do, but you could always kind of fast forward through the day. So it's really not a big deal. But having just 1 day per month can kind of be a little bit unrealistic and stressful, especially if it rains all day and then you miss out on something that you need to do in that month. I like to have it on 3-day months. I think it gives a little bit more of a genuine feel to progressing throughout the year. Fixed visual month, I keep this off. Essentially what you could do is you could set the game to only reflect 1 month out of the year. So if you're playing in any kind of seasonal mode, I would recommend not turning that on. But you could, if you want it to be winter all the time, you can put it as December, and it'll stay December as long as you want. And then finally, snow, self-explanatory. Do you want snow or not? I like it. I keep it on. Now, these couple things are pretty important. Crops and growth. So these are going to be all of your attributes on your fields about how your crops interact with, different issues and everything. So crop destruction is, can you drive over your crops and destroy them or not? So if this is on, if you drive into your fields after a certain growth stage, once the crops, grow a little bit and reach a certain level of maturity, if you drive through your field with regular tires, you will destroy the crops, and you'll leave some like ruts in the field of where you drove through them. However, you can use narrow tires and drive through your crops, as far as I know, anytime. So if you need to do some spraying or some fertilizing later on, and you forgot to do it when the crops were young, you can get a tractor with narrow tires on it, and then that will allow you to drive through your crops without destroying them. Next, periodic plowing required. There are going to be, after every so many harvests, if this is on, which I'd like to keep this on, after every so many harvests, you'll need to plow your field to maintain the same yield that you have maintained for the past couple of harvests. I think it's every like 2 or 3. Don't quote me on that, but eventually you'll be able to look on, you can look on the map and see if the field needs plowing. And then if it does, then you'll have to plow that field. Otherwise, you get, I think it's like a 15 or 20% yield penalty. So, not saying that you won't be able to grow crops on that field, but it's going to be a little bit, you're not going to get as much. So, keep that in mind. I like to have it on. I think it's a little more realistic, figuring you have to turn over the soil every once in a while. Next is field stones. These will come up in your field, and then you have to remove them. Otherwise, they will damage your equipment. There are small stones, large stones. Typically, I like to have this off. Just my personal preference. I know a lot of people that like to have it on. I just don't really want to deal with it. Yeah, I just keep it off. But keep it on if you want. It's a new feature of the game. Go crazy. Enjoy it. Next one is lime required. So lime is a nutrient for the soil. If you spread every couple of harvests, similar to periodic plowing, every few harvests, your field will need a fresh coat of lime. I believe this one is every 2 harvests. So after every second harvest, you're going to have to go and spread lime on the fields. And I think if you do that regularly, then you get a 20% yield bonus. If you don't do it, then you just don't get that 20% yield bonus. So essentially it's not necessarily a yield penalty. So you'll go from 100% to 120% yield rather than like 80% yield. But if you don't do it, you don't get that extra bonus. So I like to keep it on. It's not much work. It's pretty easy to do. A little bit, pricey, but so what? Last one is weeds. I know a lot of people that like to play with weeds off. I like to play with them on. I don't think they're really much of a nuisance if you keep on top of them and actually know what you're supposed to do to get rid of them. They're pretty simple to deal with, and it's pretty, again, just something a little more realistic. Farmers have to deal with weeds, so I like to play with weeds on. And now these are some of your vehicle controls. So dirt is just how dirty your vehicle gets. Automatic engine start. If you get in the vehicle or leave it, if this is on, the engine will automatically turn on and off upon you entering or leaving the vehicle. I like to have this off because I like to start the engine myself. Stop and go braking, I also like to have this off. What this does is if you keep the brake button held, then you'll start to go backwards. You'll shift into reverse. I just like to, brake and then shift into reverse and then actually drive in reverse. So that's why I have it off rather than having it like as one motion. Totally personal preference. Next one is trailer fill limit. So each trailer will have a volume and weight measure. So say that your trailer can hold 10,000 liters, but it can only hold 8 tons. Well, if the crop that you're hauling is, like a heavier crop, then you might only be able to fit 8 tons might not equate to 10,000 liters, right? So you might actually have a full trailer by weight, but not full by volume. And so that's what this is. So if you have this on, your trailers are subject to those weight restrictions. I usually like to keep it off because I just kind of don't really know what the crops weigh, and I've always played this way. There's always been I don't really think this has been in previous games. I've always been, just more going by volume. So either way, again, it's personal preference. Going to leave that as is. Fuel usage. This is just how fast your vehicles consume fuel. I like to actually have this on high. I think that vehicles go through fuel really, really slowly in this game. Even on high, I found myself fueling on my tractors very infrequently. So having this on high is a little bit more realistic. And so next is this AI workers. And so when you have your AI workers do some jobs on your farm, they will, they're using your equipment. They'll run out of fuel. They'll run out of seeds, etc. This is whether or not you want them to replenish those resources by themselves or if you want to do it manually. I would highly recommend that you keep this off. Yeah, and so the reason that you want to keep this off is because when they go to buy them themselves, they're really, really expensive because they purchased them from the store and they're they have incurred delivery costs and such. So having this off, it'll notify you when an AI worker runs out of something, and then you can go and refill the tool. Whether it be the seeder or the fertilizer spreader, you can go and refill it by yourself with your own resources and not spend any more money. So I would recommend keeping this off unless you absolutely do not want to worry about your AI workers, or if you have tons of cash, then turn it on. I don't care. Just know that that's why I like to have it off. And then this is a mod, so we won't worry about this. And now moving on to this last menu, or well, I guess not the last menu, but one of the last game setting menus is this general settings. And so this kind of goes through some different things that you'll see on the farm. So for example, the help window, this is actually toggleable based on a key as well. I have mine set to F1. So, I keep this off unless I want to see some help for it. It usually has like the key bindings for different tool functions, different functions of your equipment. So you could toggle this on and off with a key of your choice. So I'll keep this off generally. Colorblind mode, I'm not colorblind, so I don't need this. If you need this, just turn it on. Interactive zone markers. These are little icons. They're little blue exclamation points that show up on different things that you can interact with, such as, silos or sleep triggers at your farmhouse or anything like that. So we'll leave this on because I like to see which things are actually interactive and which aren't. But if you want to play, with kind of a limited, more realistic view, then having these like blue markers around your screen, you might not like that, and so you might want to turn that off. So personal preference again. This is kind of the same thing. Another info trigger. Oh, these are actually, you know what? I'm sorry. I stand corrected. These are going to be on the ground. You can actually see one kind of like on the right here, kind of peeking out. This is like a platform. So these are going to be, yep, there it goes. So you kind of see it in the background there. These are going to be like where you can dump your crops like in a silo, or if there's like a repair zone, how close you need to be to repair your vehicle. So yeah, so you could keep that off or on depending on whether you want to see those spaces. This is the blue icons that I was talking about, the info triggers. So, you can keep those on or off depending on what you want your view to be. Field info, I like to have this on just because when you walk up to a field, you could actually see what crop, is there, who owns it, etc., etc. Next is just some different units of measure. Set this to your personal preference. I am from the States, so I have it set in dollars, miles, Fahrenheit, and acres. Radio, I usually just put on Spotify or something, so I keep this off. Different camera options. So these are all pretty self-explanatory. I do like the camera suspension on. It kind of moves as you bounce around on the fields and stuff, kind of gives that more realistic feel. And then some of these are just different controls for different aspects of your vehicles. I do play with this on just because I'm a keyboard and mouse. I don't have like a joystick or anything. Camera sensitivity, self-explanatory, self-explanatory. And then these are, so direction changes is going between drive and reverse. And so if you have this set to manual, you actually have to shift into reverse manually, and you can, cue that to a button. I have a steering wheel, so I have it programmed to a button on my steering wheel. But automatic, it'll automatically shift between drive and reverse, particularly if you have that automatic engine, automatic stop and go braking on. If you hold the reverse button, it'll automatically shift into reverse for you. And now manual, your gear shift mode, I prefer manual clutch because I do have a steering wheel and a stick shift and a clutch pedal. You can, also use automatic or just a manual mode as well. Speedometer, you can go between engine speed and vehicle speed. Personal preference. Switch to trains. This is, I don't think there's a train on this map, but essentially if there is a train on a map, having this on, you can go through and go through your vehicles and you can actually select the train as one of your vehicles. But I will keep this off for now because I don't think I need it. These are self-explanatory. This one we don't need to worry about for now because we're not going to be doing forestry. I'll explain that maybe in a forestry episode, but for now we're going to ignore that one. Just your audio settings. And this was a mod that I have, so that's irrelevant. I think that is it for this menu that you need to know. And then this is just your control layout, so you can go through and assign any different keys to different tasks, different button key bindings. I would recommend taking a minute and actually kind of going through this. There's no best practices for this, but obviously your personal preferences are going to be different than mine. So I would highly recommend that you actually do go through and learn about the different keys that are available and kind of what they all do, because there's a lot to get used to in this game, and you might reference this quite a bit. But also, like I mentioned before, you can toggle on and off this help window, and it will tell you which of these key bindings you'll need to use for certain things. So you always have that resource available to you as well. And so also something to keep in mind is if you do have something like a steering wheel, or you want to use a controller, if you press X, you can actually go through your different gamepads and inputs. So right now, this is my keyboard controls, and then I also have a steering wheel. So this is going to show me the buttons as programmed on my steering wheel, just so you have that, available to you as well. And then finally, the last menu that I want to go through real quick is just this help menu. So if this video is completely useless to you and you're still confused about anything, feel free to go ahead and check out this help menu. It'll get you it has a lot of good information about just getting started with the game and kind of what all of the menus mean and such. But I decided to explain it to you for the sake of being thorough. But yeah, you can learn plenty about the game by just going through here as well. So honestly, I think that's pretty much it for this episode. I just wanted to go through some of the basic game settings and, kind of show you the different menus and such. And now that we're done with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. But in the next episode, stay tuned. Go ahead and check out what we're going to be going through. We're going to be going through some equipment and, kind of what we have available to us on this farm and how we're going to start growing some crops. And so tune in for the next episode. Thank you guys so much for watching. Leave a comment, and please subscribe if you enjoyed the video or if this was helpful to you. Also, any questions, put them in the comment section. I'd be happy to answer any questions about this game. I know it's a little bit complicated to get started on. So yeah, if you need to learn more about something, just let me know and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions. But in the meantime, have a great week, and I will catch y'all in the next episode. Peace.